All righty, everybody. Well, welcome to our June 2025 Akka.net community stand-up. So my name is Aaron Standard, and I'm joined here with my partner in crime, Gregorius Sodharmo. Gregorius, how are you doing today?
Oh, pretty good. Thank you. Good. How about you?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. So today we're actually going to be mostly showing off your work in the throughout the entire presentation today. I think the only thing I really meaningfully contributed here was the draw together Aspire integration. Otherwise, literally everything from the code that you were working on to the literally from the Akka.net changes to the show and tell example, all stuff that you came up with on your own. All right, let me go ahead and
Mhm.
do one thing real quick. All right, just gonna go ahead and let the Discord know that we're live. All right, good stuff. Okay, well, on that subject, I guess the first place we should go ahead and begin is kind of talking a bit about some of our recent Akka.net releases. Now, I kind
Mhm.
of mentioned here about the Akka.Analyzer stuff that this was a couple of the biggest foot guns in all of Akka.net you took care of. So let's go and pull that up real
Yes.
quick. All right, Gregorius, where should I start? Should I take a look at this first issue here?
Well, actually, they're all the same.
All right.
So, um, when you pass in an like an action or an action T or whatever, you're actually allowing your users to pass in a void, async void delegate, which is bad because when you actually invoke that async void method, it will run as a detached task, which in most cases you don't actually want. Well, the compiler actually gives you a warning, but a lot of people, including me, sometimes just ignores yellow squiggles. So it's actually bad. So these three rules applies to receive actor, the last known IDSL actor receive message handler, and the receive persistent actor command handler.
Yep.
So if you try to pass in a void async delegate into these method, Akka would scream at you, basically.
So I highlighted one of the samples from like your integration tests for the analyzer, just
Hmm.
to kind of illustrate it. So it's like we have an async handler here, but it's just a normal receive and not a receive async. So the
Async,
reason
yes.
why this is problematic is that the compiler, when it's taking this delegate, turns it into an async void method by default, is how that's built, right?
Hmm. Yep.
And so this means that there's all sorts of problems with async void, but the biggest one is that in the event that this task or whatever your child task is, if that fails, that's going to throw an unobserved task exception and crash your process. So
Mhm.
I actually saw in a customer's code base recently this exact type of pattern, not with the DSL actor, but like with the normal receive actor, and I went and fixed that for them while I was at it for this exact reason that it's a potential risk point that you want to kind of like drum out of your code if you can. So yeah, so
Mhm.
we rolled out these fixes to all the different areas where you can basically run into this problem. So it's receive actors, the DSL actors, and the persistent receive actors that all have this problem. Your normal untyped actors could never have this issue.
Mhm.
So it's all been fixed there. That got shipped as part of Akka.net 1.543. And we had a number of other fixes also go into this release as well. So the Akka.Analyzer fixes all made it in here. And you introduced a number of important fixes. I think what I'll probably do is I'll probably start with this fix that was contributed by one of our users, actually.
Okay.
Um, this fix right here came from one of our big production users of Akka.net. And the long and the short of it is that we introduced some code that's part of the test actors inside the Akka.net test kit that leverages the calling thread dispatcher. And it basically uses a custom synchronization context while we're testing in order to try to make sure the test actor is kept as the implicit sender. As it turns out, that was done in a fairly buggy way. And this would make running multiple tests in parallel, the Akka.NET test kit actually unsafe as a result. We are pretty sure that there's a famous bug with this in the Akka.hosting test kit. I'm pretty sure that bug is related to this one. In fact, Gregorius, I think we need to probably integrate Akka.NET 1.543 into Akka hosting and see if my reproduction no longer reproduces for that issue anymore. That's the one where we
Yeah.
can lose the implicit test actor as sender inside of there.
Mhm.
So anyway, long and the short of it is this was a fairly simple change. And it should make the test kit much more stable, and it should make it possible to go ahead and run the test kit with tests running in parallel much more reliably than it used to. So that was a very welcome change. The other big changes that we introduced, I guess, Gregorius, we should probably talk about the coordinated shutdown exit code PR we just merged in
Mhm.
yesterday. We had a couple of other small bug fixes like this one on Akka cluster sharding delivery, and a few others around publish with ACK. Actually, this reminds me, I didn't add it to the agenda, but Akka.NET 1.542, we didn't even ship that. We shipped that after our last community stand up, didn't we?
I think,
I think we might have. I
um,
think it was 3 weeks ago. So,
the
whoops. Guess we should probably talk a little bit about why this change was even necessary. The fact that we added reliable publishing to the distributed PubSub system is something we haven't even covered, have we?
Mhm.
Yeah, let me pull that
Yeah.
up. Actually, let me just grab the 1.542 release notes. Well, this is what I get for actually throwing this together in a hurry this morning. Um, Yeah, May 21st. Pretty sure this was after our last community stand up, or maybe it was just before. I don't actually know. We definitely talked about the Akka IO changes. So yeah, maybe this we did actually already cover this. So I'm going to assume that we did. But long and the short of it, you basically standardize the publish with ACK response types on a common
Mhm.
interface in order to make it
Yep.
easier to write ask operations against it, right?
Yep. So both the I publish succeeded and I and publish failed now inherits I publish response. So you can just, you know, uh, await on an ask for an I publish response.
Yeah, and we'll send one of these two replies back. If you use publish with ACK, which basically means we're going to wait for at least one subscriber to be registered on the mediator before we publish a message. The idea behind this is there's lots of users that run into trouble with distributed PubSub where they try to publish a message right at the same time as a subscriber is starting up on a remote node somewhere. And the issue there is that there's replication lag built into the way that distributed PubSub works. This publish with ACK design allows you to mediate that lag by basically saying, you know what, hold this message in a buffer until there's at least one subscriber available. Now, if you want something fancier than that, where you want to be able to say there needs to be at least this many subscribers and blah, 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 we're straight up not doing that. Use Kafka, dude. That's that's the that's the end of the line for that stuff. We're not doing that. But if you need a mechanism to basically make sure you don't fire off a bunch of messages into dead letters, publish with ACK is fantastic for that. So that's what we're probably going to use that for. The other big thing that you added here, aside from some other bug fixes, is we added exit codes to coordinated shutdown for Akka.NET in order to try to
Mhm.
provide some better information about how an Akka.NET process was terminated. So, Gregorius, why don't you give us some color on that?
Well, you can. There's last known option in Hocon. I don't think we exposed that in hosting. We might need to later. But if you set the exit CLR or CLR to true, then whenever there's a problem with cluster, for example, and it executes the coordinated shutdown, it would actually close the process down. Like it will set this itself down. It's usually useful when you know the cluster is unhealthy and the cluster node is being down. And if you don't set this, then the .NET ASP process would just kept on running because you know Akka is just basically running side by side inside a hosted service. So if you set exit CLR the option to true,
which it is set to true by
when
default. Yeah.
yeah, is it? I thought
Yeah,
it
it
was
is.
false. Oh, okay, I didn't know
It's set
that.
to true. Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that. But when that is set to true, whenever coordinate shutdown executes, when at the final act, it will shut down the process and it will emit one of these exit codes, basically.
Yeah. And so, like we said, we've got a little table, the exit codes here. This reminds me, Gregorius, we should probably add this to the Akka.NET documentation.
Yeah,
Um,
we should.
but basically, we just merged this in yesterday. We took us a couple of tries to get a design we were happy with, but we
Mhm.
basically will default to providing a zero exit code, which is happy. We would normally provide that. Otherwise, we'll provide a 3 or a 4 if we know that this node's being exited for like unhappy reasons, namely node got down from the cluster or it failed to join. And then basically otherwise, I mean, this works side by side with the way the Microsoft.extensions.hosting stuff works. So we're just trying to go ahead and kind of working on providing some more descriptive feedback to like process orchestrators like Kubernetes or Windows services, kind of trying to help it understand that like this process exited like not under its own volition is what we're basically trying to do here. So yeah, that's kind of what that's all about. So that covers it, I think, for our previous releases. Now
Mhm.
we'll give a kind of a quick update on Akka.NET 1.6 real fast. One big thing that we did this month is we synced the 1.6 branch with the development branch. I mean, there's been like 150 commits since our last big set of changes on 1.6. So Gregorius took care of that. We're going to be flipping the development branch over to the 1.6 branch pretty soon and starting to do a lot more feature work on it, where we're going to be making some bigger breaking changes, probably doing a lot more stuff to get AOT support done. We're like way behind on getting a beta of the AOT stuff done. And that's not through any lack of trying on our part. It's mostly been a function of us having a lot of other big projects sitting between us and being able to work on that. I've got a project that I've been tweeting about nonstop. Hopefully I'll have a an update on that next month. I'm hoping that we'll get some of that stuff deployed soon. But we're basically going to start picking up work on this again. I personally am very, very keen to get AOT done. I would very much like to get some work started on our quick transport. Lots of good things are coming down the pipe here. But it's basically mostly a matter of clearing out our backlog of business oriented projects first. So, on that note, I guess we should talk a bit about our show and tell, which is all going to be
Mhm.
about .NET Aspire plus Akka.NET.
Mhm.
Now, the basic gist here, if you're not familiar with .NET Aspire, let me go ahead and fire up. Let's see. This is the Aspire window for, let me go ahead and close some of these other tabs here. This is the Aspire dashboard for drawtogether.net. So drawtogether.net's probably our most like professional code sample out of all the ones that we've managed. It has it integrates with like ASP.NET Core identity, uses Blazor server, uses SQL server, has Entity Framework Core migrations built into it, uses Akka persistence, uses Azure storage for stuff as well. Actually, I don't think this version of it does. I think that's all in a pull request I haven't merged in yet. But yeah, the long and the short of it is we have like kind of a full-blown Akka.NET application here. Now, if you're not familiar with .NET Aspire, uh, basically what it more or less is that this has really been a fairly big effort by Microsoft to try to make it easier for developers to build distributed applications. And what I mean by that is not necessarily things like Akka cluster, but stuff like ASP.NET Core that depends on a database and a Redis cache, and it has to run under a reverse proxy. This is kind of taking a lot of the ideas that were permeated from tools like, I guess dev containers would be one example. Maybe trying to use things like I'm trying to remember what was that tool that integrated with YARP for trying to do local environment stuff. blanking on the name for it now, but this is kind of an iteration of a lot of those ideas that Microsoft's been working on for a number of years. And so Aspire is a little bit more opinionated about this. It's trying to essentially give you a programmatic way of describing your application and being able to launch it directly from the command line or Visual Studio. So in this case, I'll show you my Aspire code in just a second. Let me go ahead and actually show the little dashboard here. So in this application, we have a SQL database that's using Draw Together. We are using, I think, some Azure table storage here. Oh, this is still running the old Aspire thing. Oh, that's a bummer. Well, maybe it's running the new one. I don't really remember. But basically, we're running Azure storage. We also have an Entity Framework Core migration project. And then we also have our actual web application right here. And let's see if I'm logged in. I think I might need to log out and recreate my account. Yeah, let me try that real quick. Let's see. If I try logging in as Aaron at Pettibridge, because I actually wiped out my local volume here, so I shouldn't even have a password anymore. Let me go ahead and give this a try. Let's see if I log in. Invalid login attempt. Yeah, that's what I thought. All right. Let me go ahead and register. Use my email address here. Go and pass in a fake password. Register, not now. Yeah, it's still not working quite right, this one. I don't know what the issue is. Maybe Aspire's got an old, because it looks like it's referencing what's in here, which isn't actually working correctly. Yeah, let's take a look at the errors here. Well, the error that I'm seeing, sorry, go ahead, Gregorius.
I could run the demo that is on my local machine.
You know what? Why don't you give it a try? Because it looks like this is that same Blazor issue I was running into earlier, and I'm actually not sure what is causing that. If I go and take a look, let me show this real quick, Gregorius, since this is a good way to take a look at debugging an application.
Okay.
But if I go ahead and take a look at this here, these are all the structured logs coming from the OpenTelemetry exporter we have built into .NET Aspire. So you can see here, I created a new account with the password. We're sending an email confirmation. Email confirmation is actually technically, I think, disabled in here. Or, yeah, maybe it's not. Yeah, maybe it's not disabled. I thought it was. And then we can see that we have a rendering component here where it looks like there was a problem actually rendering a Blazor component somewhere in here. So we've got some sort of UI issue, which is probably why it's not completely rendering correctly. We've got some sort of database command here. And if I take a look at my metrics for this application, let's see if there are any. I can go ahead and get a look at some of the .NET runtime metrics. If I take a look at exceptions here, I don't know why it says there's thousands of exceptions coming up. I guess there are a bunch of them all being thrown there. WebSockets, JS disconnected exception, navigation exceptions. Man, this application looks like it's having a bit of a rough go of it. If I take a look at the number of active SignalR connections, I can see there's 1, 2 going at a time. Blazor server uses the Blazor hub, which is kind of an implicit SignalR connection. So you can see some of that in there. A couple HTTP requests. You're going to get all this data for free inside .NET Aspire. Oh, not a free. This is using my OpenTelemetry instrumentation. It's just that .NET Aspire scoops all this up. Okay. So the next thing I guess that I should go ahead and do here is have Gregorius try and run the demo, since apparently my version is down for the count. Gregorius, do you have your screen ready to share?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Can you go ahead and start sharing it in StreamYard?
Good. It should be.
All right. Let me go ahead and remove mine, and I'll add yours. All right. Go for it.
Okay. So we're just going to start running it from console. It's building. Okay. Let me open. So,
dude, what terminal are you using? That looks awesome.
this is Word.
Okay, making a mental note. I've been using Commander for years, but that looks good. I like it.
So we do have everything running, and Draw Together is actually running under 3 replicas. There's already a session going.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. So it works.
Nicely done. And you got it working with 3 replicas?
It 3 replicas.
That's
And they're
awesome.
all running on different processes instead of, running inside Docker containers.
And that's one of the things that I thought made Aspire really cool for Akka.net is a problem that we've had for years and years and years is like, so Akka.net doesn't really require a lot of additional infrastructure to run a cluster. But the problem is that every node's got to be addressed individually, right?
Hmm.
.NET Aspire makes it really easy to do that and still have an F5 launch from Visual Studio experience, which is really nice.
Hmm.
So if you wanted to do something like attach a debugger to each of those processes individually, this will let you do that. All you do is you just launch from Writer or Visual Studio with the debug option, right, Gregorius?
Actually, that's out of the box. You can just set a debug, like
A,
stop,
a
a
breakpoint.
breakpoint,
Yeah.
and it will just stops.
And that's
That
pretty
came
slick.
right out of the box. Yeah.
And so that brings up a good point. Why don't we take a look at the Aspire host real quick and kind of talk a bit about how that can integrate with Akka.net?
Okay. So let me stop this for a bit. Okay. So we do have a really bare bone example of how you can do this with just Akka clustering and Aspire. Basically, we would need to leverage the uh, Microsoft extensions, that configuration option pattern, and then inside the app host, this is what you need to do. State how many replicas they need. If you're using Azure, then we I personally for a local development would suggest that you use this because it makes clustering a lot easier in Akka because it's automated. Like we're leveraging Akka management and cluster bootstrap basically, and then you would have to declare two endpoints. One is for the remote Akka.remote endpoint for Akka. The second one is the Akka.management endpoint, and then just start it.
And you wait for
Uh,
the Azure resource to become available in that last line, right?
yep. So inside Akka itself, this is the complete bare bone you need. Basically, you could just copy and paste this into your project and it will work. It, like I said, it leverages Akka management and Akka management cluster bootstrap to basically bootstrap the cluster together during startup.
And so this is our last YouTube video we produced on the channel. I take that back. We did one of our webinar from last month. That one we produced on the channel, but we did one on Akka management and Akka discovery. We're basically
Mhm.
just using those same mechanisms locally. And like Gregorius mentioned, the reason why those are helpful is they kind of allow you to form clusters dynamically by basically talking to the Azure table storage to figure out who is running where inside this system, right?
Mhm.
Um, so
Yes.
that will give you the ability to go ahead and run, let's say multi-node clusters locally. You can even run a heterogeneous cluster locally too. Like, for instance, you recently migrated web crawler to use .NET Aspire also, didn't you?
Yep, I did. So if you look here, if we go into the logs, you will see that Akka management, Akka cluster bootstrap, and discovery actually form the cluster on itself. Like you don't have to set anything,
No seed
which is
nodes.
really nice. Yep, no seed nodes, zero seed nodes.
So yeah, so this is like really kind of the first time we've had an easy solution for trying to be able to run like a full-blown Akka.NET cluster directly from like Visual Studio. In the past, you had to dick around with like multiple launch profiles or launching
Hmm.
several processes, and it was not all that wonderful of an experience
Yeah, yeah.
uh trying to go ahead and debug any of this stuff. Yeah, let's take a look at the web crawler code sample real quick, Gregorius. Show us what you did for Aspire there.
Well, it's basically the same thing. If you look at, if you compare the code from here to here, it's basically almost the same thing. Like all of the settings are the same. It's just that we use a different naming convention for our options. And if we run that, let's spin for a bit. Yeah, this experience is light year ahead of what we used to, you know, just being able to just run a project and have everything run in the background, orchestrated and ready to go is just nice.
Now, one thing I know that you're not doing right now, because it's like kind of another step ahead, is you can technically run multiple web instances, but I think Aspire actually has to proxy them under a reverse proxy, if I'm not mistaken,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes.
Yeah.
If we go back to the draw together sample, let us run this again, just to give an example. We go to the resources here. There's actually 3 draw together nodes running right now, and all of them actually have their own web port basically open.
And that's because there's really like a Aspire's proxying it, right?
Yes, yes. As you can see here, all of them are open at a localhost 7088. That's because Aspire puts a really simple proxy in front of it. I think they use York.
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
think they
sure.
use YARP. Yep.
Mhm.
Good deal, man. All right. Um, yeah, let's go ahead and see if web crawler will actually run. Let's try crawling maybe the Akka.net website.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Set that origin, right?
.net.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Query.
Ah, there you go.
Yeah.
Good stuff. I think it's going to have some trouble dealing with the JavaScript in DocFX's navigation. I didn't write the crawler to be sophisticated enough to render, SPA or like JS powered navigation, but looks like it found all the static stuff, which is great. All
Mhm.
right. Well, good
And
deal. So we're probably going to do some more detailed videos and like breakdowns of this stuff later. But the reason why we've been actually, I guess we have one more sample if you want to pull up a Kafka one.
oh,
um,
that's true.
yeah.
Let me try and open that.
Yeah, we don't need to run it and show the whole doodad or whatever. But you could at the very least kind of walk through the app host code. That would be probably still pretty good.
This is actually an example of how you would do it with old kind of Akka code. Like just to show that actually runs with old code. Like this is not even running on hosting. It's plain old, .NET framework code.
It's Hokon code. Yeah.
Yes, it's Hokan code, and it's really as simple as this. Like we start an instance of the producer project, and we start an instance of the consumer project. We start Kafka and runs.
Now, can you explain how the environment variable that the simple producer and simple consumer, they both look for the Kafka broker, right? Can you explain how that
Yeah.
gets populated using this code?
Well, when you use Aspire, like you use the add Kafka code right here, right? And then you add the wait for reference, this code right here. Aspire actually injects a connection string Kafka environment variable into each of these running processes. So
And that's what the
let's
with
say,
reference call does.
yes, that's what the with reference call does. So inside your consumer or producer program application here, you would need to actually use this to pull that information from the environment inside your app.
And you can customize the name of the connection string that Aspire creates inside that with reference method, right?
Not sure.
Well, is it loaded question? Yes, you can. um, basically, what I was trying to kind of illustrate here is basically if you want to try to like add .NET Aspire to an existing application, because all of these applications, with the exception of the demo app you created, these were all pre-existing applications we added Aspire to. You can basically just have Aspire populate some of those resources you need, such as SQL Server, Kafka, Azure Storage, or whatever. You can have Aspire populate those connection strings that you use by just supplying them into the environment variables. You don't necessarily need to install any of the Aspire client libraries. We haven't done that in any of these code samples. So just doing it that way kind of gives you an easy integration point between the two. So yeah, I think we're probably going to continue our usage of Aspire and a lot of our code samples going forward, just so it's easier for people who are trying to learn Akka.NET or learn a particular feature of it to go ahead and get up and running quickly. So, Gregorius, thank you very much for the demos. That was very helpful. We will likely produce some more detailed like breakdown videos of this in the future, but because we've been in the process of trying to make it easier for people to get up and running with Akka.NET, we figured we should show you where you can find these samples and kind of help explain the benefits of why Aspire might be helpful in your own like personal usage of Akka.NET. Gregorius, do you have any tips or tricks you want to share about using Aspire before we hang up and call it a day here?
Well, the easiest one is you can actually inspect the all of the environment variables it passes. Like
Cool.
you can actually, yeah. So if something went wacky, you can actually check what the Aspire is actually passing on into the environment variable. Like I said, with this code right here, where's that? The Kafka code. If you want to know what the environment variables actually is, and you kind of missed it, and you need to know what the exact name is, it will actually show up in this panel right here in the inspector.
Yeah, that's very cool. The other thing is if you use Akka hosting and you use the basically the Microsoft.extensions.logging integration, you can go ahead and get structured log data out of your applications into Aspire's log viewer, but Aspire will also pick up console logs too, in case you don't have that configured. So
yeah,
very useful all around for trying to go ahead and get some telemetry. I haven't really messed around with like I haven't really messed around that much with the open telemetry tracing or the metrics all that much when I'm looking at it. It's mostly been the logging that I found to be helpful.
yeah.
Yep. All right,
They do
everyone.
mention that.
Go ahead. Sorry. You go ahead.
They do mention, yeah, they do mention that they have tutorials on how to integrate Aspire with Prometheus and Seek. So,
well, that's that'd be helpful too. You can go ahead and launch like a version of that local telemetry stack that Stephen Cleary put together and get that launched with Aspire. Yeah, why not? I think for a lot of my use cases, it's like, so I've been using Aspire real heavily in the SDK bin rewrite that I've been tweeting about so often. And what it's helpful for me is that we have a couple of services that need to be running at the same time that are launched in the same solution. But the really big one is I've been doing a ton of schema changes on basically our SQL Server schema. And we're using Entity Framework Core. We're using Entity Framework migrations. It's been really nice to be able to go ahead and have Aspire automatically apply those for me as part of our startup sequence. So I can go ahead and spin up like a brand new SQL Server database. I can use a volume if I want to go ahead and save my work from before. So like a Docker volume for that stuff. In fact, I think we use one on the Draw Together code sample if you want to see how to do that yourself. But I'll use like a volume. And if I want to apply a new data migration or a schema migration, I'll just delete the volume, then rebuild the entire app. It has a bunch of seed data that was written before any of my schema migrations were put in there. So it'll go ahead and inject all that. It'll then migrate that seed data to the new format. And then I can go ahead and go through and do some manual testing. I've got automated tests too. I guess the other thing we didn't really talk about today, maybe this merits its own video, is in Draw Together, at least, we're actually using the aspire.testing library to run full-blown integration tests, where we can go ahead and run our entire application in the background of like an end-to-end testing library, and then use Playwright to go and actually control the drawing surface for Draw Together. And we actually do integration testing on it that way. Aspire makes that very easy to orchestrate as well. So it's kind of like test containers on steroids, that stuff.
Yeah. And the really nice thing I really like about Aspire is that you can actually wait on something, even wait until it completes. Like before, when we use Kubernetes, we have to do hacky stuff to wait until one resource is available or another resource is available, because there's no wait in Kubernetes. You do have it in Docker Compose, but Docker Compose is really opinionated and error prone. If you mistype something or you forgot to rebuild your Docker container, it would just wreak havoc to your test environment. This makes it really easy. Just hit F5, build, run, and everything got composed perfectly.
Yeah, the only real drawback is if you're dealing with stuff like data volumes or whatever, you might potentially have to go through and clean those up if you're trying to get a fresh slate. But you have to explicitly choose to do that. I don't think it creates them by default. But I feel like for local development, Aspire has definitely been an asset, not just for working with Akka.net, but also like my work on SDK bins primarily ASP.NET and Entity Framework Core. There is Akka.net in it, but it's like not the primary surface through which customers interact with that application. So I'm a big fan of it. So we'll probably do some more videos on Akka.net and .NET Aspire. Maybe we'll do some standalone .NET Aspire videos, but overall, we're pretty happy with it. Figured we should show you some examples of it. And on that note, I guess we'll go ahead and catch everyone next month in July. So don't forget to like and subscribe. And please go ahead and leave any questions for us in Discord or in the comments. Thanks for your time today, and we'll catch you next time.